Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back for another episode of the Where in the World podcast featured on whereintheworldismatt.com. I'm Matt, so thank you so much for joining me again today for the second episode of this podcast series. Today, we're going to have a really fun conversation with someone really close to me, but I'm not going to give away too much because I want you guys to stay tuned and hear that interview. He's such an incredible guy, and I think you're going to love listening to him. Today, though, we're going to be talking about adversity and overcoming difficult times in our lives, both personal and travel-wise. So how have we dealt with this in the past, and how can we kind of look at it going forward? And that will be what our topic of conversation or question that I'll propose again today will be in regards to overcoming adversity. Last time, for our very first episode, I got the chance to talk with Alex, and some of you reached out to me, and it was really good to get feedback from you guys because you guys were talking to me about what I can do better, differently. I love getting that advice from you guys, but I also loved hearing from some of you about responding to the question that I proposed. And if you remember, or if you tuned in last time, we were talking about New Year's themes. And a theme is kind of this fun way, or like this opportunity to come up with like more of a concept or a word idea that you can follow throughout the entire year in every aspect of your life, rather than having just like a New Year's resolution that a lot of the times it's like a one-time fix and then you kind of move on with it. So I talked about my theme being persistence, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about being persistent and how I've done so even just in the last 2 weeks. So currently, I'm working on a grant, and this grant is to fund money to help renovate the community performing arts center within my community during my service here with the Peace Corps. And it's taken a lot of persistence on my part working with my counterpart because, one, there's the language barrier, and my counterpart doesn't speak any English. So we have to go through those daily struggles every time of not necessarily understanding one another, but working through it. And we're both very strong individuals when it comes to working by ourselves. So trying to put two people with those type of personalities together to write this grant has been a fun process. But we've both demonstrated that persistence, and we're getting through the process. And it's kind of a learning thing for me as well, because this is the first time I've ever written a grant. But I think it looks awesome. So a little overview on what we're trying to do with that grant. Last time I talked a little bit about my love for dance, especially tap dances. Some of you already know this who know me personally, but I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to bring that part of my life over here and introduce it to them in kind of this new culture. And I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of the youth and teach a couple days a week at our performing arts school, tap dance. And the kids are starting to really love it and enjoy it. But the issue that we had was that we didn't have any tap shoes for the kids, because tap dancing isn't a native type of dance here in Armenia. So when I was home over Christmas vacation, I was able to bring back with me about 10 pairs of tap shoes, and a shout out to everyone who donated, because those were not all of mine. It made the kids so happy when they first got to see them, and they're excited to start actually practicing with tap shoes because they love the sound and they just love the excitement of doing something different. But we're trying to fund to get brand new tap shoes that are all matching, and then also costumes, and then renovating some of the dance space, like putting new mirrors on the walls, getting cabinets for the kids to put their stuff, and so on. But we're really trying to create this safe and exciting, fun, new environment for the youth who are already involved in our community in this performing arts school. And it's not just dance that's being impacted here, because here in Vardanich, you can take classes for music, for singing, and dancing. So it's such a unique opportunity for these kids, and I'm so excited that I get to be involved with that and try to make an impact, especially if we get this grant. And if we do get this grant, we'll start seeing that project take place in the coming months. So I'll definitely keep you guys posted. But shout out to a couple of you who ended up reaching out to me after the previous podcast. And I want to read some of your comments, because as I said last time, when I'm proposing some of these questions or challenges, I definitely want to hear from you guys. It helps me to develop this conversation and to hear from you guys and to see kind of what's going on in your lives. So shout out first off to Brenda. She had written on Facebook, very interesting and informative, Matt. My theme is going to be progress in every area of my life. I've always liked the saying progress, not perfection. I tend to be a perfectionist, so this will be a good challenge for me. And I think that's awesome, Brenda. I think you're definitely catching on to what the whole idea of that theme is, and you can implement this idea into your everyday life. And then a second shout out to one of my good friends from studying abroad, that program I talked about last time, semester at sea, and his name is Dom. And Dom wrote, the podcast was very interesting, great topic and guest. My theme for the new year is going to be productivity. I'm going to try to be productive towards my career and my life goals every day. And I think that's awesome. So if you guys haven't already and you want to, you can always shoot me an email at whereintheworldismatt@hotmail.com, or I definitely love getting those personal messages on Facebook or just a general comment. So as I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about adversity this time around. And the question I have for you guys this week, and again, I hope you all reach out and kind of get involved with this conversation. So the question this week is, when was a time that you had to overcome adversity? And I think that's such a good question because it doesn't have to be just travel related, even though that's the primary focus of this. But in every aspect of our lives, we're going to have difficult times to overcome. So I'm really interested to hear, when was that time? And then some follow-up questions for you are, how did you react to it? Because everyone would react differently. So I'm definitely interested to kind of see what was that time that you had to overcome that adverse moment. How did you react to it? And then now that you've done it, you've been through it, how will you, or would you react differently knowing what you know now? It's kind of a 3-part question. So to recap, when was a time that you had to overcome adversity? How did you react? And would you act differently knowing what you know now? And you're going to have some time to think about this as we're talking with my special guest today. So sit back, relax. Thank you so much again for letting me into your guys' ears. And this is the Where in the World podcast. Okay, I'm really excited about my guest here today. I have the network manager and webmaster from Blind Inc. up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this character also happens to be my stepfather. So we're going to get underway with this interview. I would like to welcome James Gagnier. James, how are you doing today?
Hey, Matt, I'm doing very well, and it's nice to be here.
Yeah, so I know you have a couple of really funny stories, and I think the audience is going to absolutely love listening to you today because you have a very interesting background. For those of you who don't know, and I won't get too much into it because I don't want to tell his life story for him, but both my mother and James are legally blind. They have no visual abilities, and they are absolutely nuts about traveling, and I'm super excited to hear about some of the obstacles that they have to face in doing just everyday travel, as well as some of the larger travel opportunities that they've had in their lifetime. And James has a very cool background story. So, James, if I remember right, you are from Canada originally. You have a pretty large French-Canadian family living right on the border of Montreal, or within Montreal, within Ontario, that kind of region. And let's hear a little bit about your family.
My family is originally from Ontario. We're right on the border of Quebec, and where we are is my father passed away last year, but my mom still lives on a piece of land that when you look over the river, you can actually see the Quebec side of the province, basically both provinces, and it's a very nice place to live. It's a great big rural area. I personally lived when I was living in Canada. I lived in Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, and I lived there for most of my life, from the time I graduated college to pretty much the time that I moved to Iowa.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you're now living in Iowa. Before we get to that part of your story, I'd like to talk a little bit about Canada, because I know you and I in the past we've talked about a pretty funny story about you growing up in Canada, especially during the time that you guys were building your house, because the house that you're living in now isn't the original house that you were born in. And I know you had some pretty funny camping stories with your mom, your dad, and your brother during the time of that construction. So you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. Basically, what happened is I lived in a small town called Hawkesbury until my fourth grade, and then from between the fourth and fifth grade, my parents decided to move out into the country, and they moved into a smaller town, but we were living on the outskirts, and the land that we were living on only had a small cabin the size of maybe 20 by 20, and we had our bedrooms in there, kitchen, dining room. We didn't have water. We didn't have we had electricity because we brought that in because we needed it, but we didn't have water. We didn't have indoor plumbing. I remember that my dad was building a house and I was helping build it as well. I mean, I was in fifth grade at the time, or starting my fifth grade. And what we did is every day we went out and we did something for the house. I remember when we poured in the cement blocks and all that stuff. It took about 5 months to build it from scratch. We moved into that cabin in June, right after I got out of school, and I was going to start my new school year in the small town of Lornial, Ontario. But for that house to be built, we had not even dug up the hole for the foundation yet. And we moved into this little cabin, and the only thing that we had was a outhouse. And we had to go into the outhouse from approximately June until almost the end of October. And I tell you what, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to go to the little boys' room and having to walk maybe 150 feet from the cabin in your PJs and running shoes or bare feet when it's October and it's maybe 20 degrees out there, it gets cold. So that's one of the stories that I do remember. But you know what? I remember that fondly because I enjoyed it. And we moved into the house at the end of October, and we were on plywood for about 2 years while we were continuing construction.
So you mentioned that you were doing odd jobs, and at this time you were just in the fourth grade, and you still had your sight. So I'm kind of curious on what kind of odd jobs your dad had you doing, because James's dad, Ken, he was quite the character when he was still alive. He loved to tell jokes. He always had something going on. Loved having his hand in some woodworking activity. So I'm really curious what he had you doing for the house.
What I ended up doing for the house, basically, it was climbing up on the roof and hammering down plywood. I mean, the house, somebody put a piece of plywood on there. I was partially sighted. I mean, I really high partial at the time. So I'd climb up on the roof. My dad would nail a 2x4 at the bottom of the piece of plywood so that nobody would slide off. So I'd be first of all, it was a roof that was slanted. So basically, I'd be slanted there on the roof with a bunch of nails in my pockets and hammering plywood sheets, and they'd put another sheet, like there'd be a big hole beside me because they hadn't put the sheet of plywood there. They nailed four nails on each corner of the plywood, and I'd get in there and nail every foot, nail a couple of pieces of nail in there, and nail all these plywoods on all the slats and everything. I did not the entire roof by myself, but me and my kid brother, that's what we did. We just basically got up there. We did all kinds of stuff for the house. We did, at one point, we carried bricks and put them, when we first started the house, we were building with basically huge bricks, and we built the whole front. We'd put the bricks in there in the front and count them and put them so my dad could just take them and put them in where they needed to be. We did all kinds of stuff like that around the house. Anything we could do that he'd let us do, and he'd tell us to do this and that. and we had quite a few different jobs around the house. I remember one time he told us that we had to start getting water out of the basement in buckets because we didn't have a sump pump at the time, and unfortunately we dug it a little too deep, and there was water all over the basement, and there was he wanted to put cement in there the following day. So here we are with buckets until he went out and got himself a sump pump. And then once the sump pump got in there, the water cleared itself out. I remember sticking a hose out the window of the basement, and we were just throwing that out. The water was all the water was all over the basement, but we managed to clear it out. Once we got the sump pump, that was perfectly good because all the water got out. But before that, who do you think was throwing water out the window from the basement? It was me and my brother, and my mom did too.
So after you guys got this house built and you started living in it, I know your family was pretty outdoorsy and they liked to go camping quite a bit. If I remember right, you guys had a boat, which was really convenient because you lived right on Lake Ontario. I've been up there. Absolutely beautiful scenery, great campgrounds up there. So can you kind of talk about going for those like longer I don't know, quote unquote long family vacations with with mom and dad and the younger brother, Keith?
Uh, yeah, well, basically what we used to do is every summer, okay, after we built the house, every summer we used to go to a place called Camp Wildwood, which was where my Aunt Nancy used to live, and she'd rent a piece of land every day, a little campground every day, and we'd rent the campground right next to them, a little lot next to them, and we'd spend the summer there. Because since I wasn't working, and my dad was working, but since I didn't have school, neither did my brother, we spent our summers in there. We'd go hiking, and there was a lake nearby. We'd go play in the lake. I remember one time a friend of my dad's, his name was Roy, he basically was camping beside us, and they had kids the same age as me and my brother. Me and the kid's name that was my age, his name was Brian. We decided, hey, it's a big long. We were talking about a 10-mile long lake, okay? Me and him decided, hey, we got a canoe. Let's go canoeing. We get into the canoe and we started paddling. We were just paddling away. And then we just paddled and had a good time. All of a sudden, my dad comes around in the boat. We accidentally canoed approximately 5 miles out of from where, and we didn't even have life jackets at the time. So my dad was not a happy camper when he came and got us with the boat. So I still remember him get in the boat here, and he grabbed the canoe and tied it to basically to the back of the boat, and we headed home, and we were not allowed in the water for a week. I remember that time. That was no fun. But we enjoyed the canoe ride. We saw the frogs, and it was peaceful.
You know, I don't know if I'll ever hop into a canoe ever again because one of the few times that I did it, I was actually traveling on the semester at sea program in the Amazon River, and we were taking canoes through the Amazon in piranha-infested waters. And I will never forget this. This is why I say I don't think I'll ever hop in a canoe again, because we got trapped in this giant thunderstorm and it was just pouring down rain, and our canoe literally started to flood. We're talking about a 10-foot long canoe. It was a pretty big one, but we had the back 2 feet of it completely tipped in the river, and we're paddling for our lives because we're just scared. We're scared that the piranhas are gonna start hopping in the boat and try bite us. Not that they probably would, but I just remember that vivid image. It was such a eerie scenery. Is completely pitch black, the lightning lighting up the sky, you could see it hitting trees, and you're just thinking, oh my god, I'm in the worst environment I think I could possibly be, like doing the cross on my forehead to chest, like, oh man, I better start saying my prayers. But no, that definitely sounds fun, James. So you had a pretty eventful childhood, and then you went to college at Ottawa State University, if I remember correctly. Ottawa University. And I know there you didn't have a whole lot of money, so you had to do a lot of odd jobs to kind of keep your head afloat while you're paying your way through school. You want to talk about what did you study? What were some of those odd jobs? What was the university life up in Canada kind of like at Ottawa University?
University was a lot of fun for me. I was there for 3.5 to 4 years, and I lived in residence the first couple of years. And one of the things that obviously I did not have a lot of money, and so I supplemented my income with odd jobs. I worked for the university for a while. One of my jobs was to go around, figure a residence of maybe 20 floors with 30 rooms per floor. So you're talking about maybe 60 people per floor and two full men's and women's bathrooms. My job was to change the toilet paper in these bathrooms. I used to get off college, I used to get off my classes at about 10 o'clock at night. I'd go home, change into a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, and then I'd have to go like up 3 floors with big bags of toilet paper, knock on the ladies' room, anybody in here? And if they were there, I'd usually, okay, the toilet paper's by the door. And I don't know if they liked it or not, but if there was nobody in there, and I'd go in there and I'd change the toilet paper figure. I still remember that each bathroom had 3 stalls and with 2 rolls per stall. That was my job, to change the toilet paper. I don't know why they never asked me to change the paper towels, but I guess people use their towels on their own or whatever. But that was all my job, is change the toilet paper. First thing I used to do is I'd go up, and I used to love to start from the top floor, work my way down. I wouldn't have to go back up. So the first thing I did is I'd get all the toilet paper, put it in the stairwells every second floor, because I need enough for every 2 floor. Once all that was done, I just start my way up and work my way down. It was kind of a routine. I'd go one bathroom, the other bathroom, next floor, all the way down till I got to the first floor, and then my job was done. That's what it would be. 3 hours later, and I tell you what, the pay wasn't all that great. That's one of the jobs that I had, but I mean, I did anything to make money. At one point, a friend of mine said, "Hey, look, I got a job. I've got to replace every door in this apartment building over the next 2 weeks." And this was in the middle of summer, and I wasn't working at the time. I said, "Okay, I'll do it." So my job was not to replace the doors. My job was to cart these things from the garage all the way up. That was like a 10-story building. Figured out, I don't remember how many doors there were, but there must have been at least some like 20 per floor, because it's every door in every apartment. So, and figure each apartment had at least 5 doors. So it was like amazing. And, I built muscles that summer.
Just thinking about the story about the toilet paper, they probably were paying some other sap to just go through all the bathrooms and put the paper towels in, and you were doing the toilet paper.
I never met the other guy that did the paper towels.
Your paths just never crossed. So.
Probably not.
Yeah. But I love this story, because you're telling me that you had one other job, and it has to do with delivering papers. Oh God! So I want to hear about this one.
I basically took a job in. There's a friend of mine, actually my roommate, that basically had a car, and he delivered tons and tons of papers. And he said, I need a helper to help deliver the papers. My job was to throw these things on the right-hand side of the road, basically, because he was in the driver's side. So we'd drive, and usually we'd start doing this about 1 o'clock in the morning. Okay? So I remember I'd take the papers, fold them, put them in the bags, and then my job was to drive around. It didn't matter, in the middle of winter, it was windows wide open, and he just like turn into a driveway. I'd throw the paper on the veranda, and then he'd back right out. And if he had one on his side, he'd throw it. And my job was to get the papers from the back and make sure they were folded in the plastic bags. I did that. Usually it took about 4 hours to do all the papers, because he had routes all over the place. I mean, in Ottawa, outside Ottawa, he had like 4 routes that he did. And then I got paid for that. Not a heck of a lot, but at least, hey, I got breakfast. Every morning when we were done, I'd go for breakfast.
That's not bad compensation, and if you're not getting paid a whole lot for the job, I guess. Probably saying, hey, let's go grab a coffee and a couple of donuts over at good old Tim Hortons, and we'll call it good.
I used to have the same thing every morning. You used to go to this place. This is how long it's been. It was the early 80s. And basically, at the time, you get bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee for $2.95.
I don't think my generation even knows the dollar amount of $2.95, because we can't get anything for that cheap anymore. Doesn't even matter what it is. So you lived with your parents out in the rural community, and then you went to college in Ottawa. You stuck in Ottawa for quite a while living in this city. That must have been a pretty different lifestyle, especially because during this time in your life is when you started to lose your eyesight. And if you don't mind, I'd love hearing a little bit about kind of what that was like, some of the struggles. How did it come about? What did it mean for the job that you were doing at the time? Yeah, just anything in that regard.
Well, at the time, I lost my eyesight in 1997. And I was working for myself at the time doing printing, and I was working on the computers, training people. And at the time, that changed my life quite a bit because I lost my sight fairly quickly, from one day seeing everything to the next day seeing nothing. And it was very difficult for me because obviously losing your sight is a bit of a downer, heck, as well as it should be. But at one point, I did nothing for about maybe 6 months, and a friend of mine told me, "Look, what are you going to do? You're going to sit here all day?" All I did was sit and watch TV or listen to TV, whatever you want to call it. Watch TV, listen to the hockey game on the radio, anything to keep my mind off of the fact that I'd lost my sight. And at one point, I decided, and my friend told me, he says, "You're either going to do something or you're going to sit there for the rest of your life." And I said, "Well, no, that's not what I want to do." So at that point, I finally decided to start looking for a job again, got involved with the local Canadian National Institute for the Blind, and they helped me find all kinds of like odd jobs and work and stuff like that. And that's what I did. And obviously, I became a bit of an expert in web accessibility. That was in the early 2000s. By the time 97, it took me about 2-3 years to get established. In the early 2000s, I started working for the federal government of Canada as a web accessibility tester. And at the time, there weren't many of those guys around because it was fairly new, web access and all that stuff. So I got working with a team, and we used to assess Canadian government website, basically. We go in and they'd make appointments with us, and we go in and show them their website, how it would be seen with screen reading technology such as NVDA or JAWS. And for those of you who don't know, screen readers are just a program that your screen will be read out loud to you so you can hear what's on the screen.
So yeah, I mean, I've been surrounded by an individual who's been affected by being blind their entire life with my mother. Maybe not so as drastic as you, because you went and lived, up to this point about, half of your life was sighted, and then doing all of those jobs, living that really fun childhood, really getting to experience everything. And then, like you said, just one day, sight's gone. Maybe a blessing or a curse for my mother because, she lost her eyesight at a pretty young age and really hasn't known life anything other than without sight. So I think maybe she's had an opportunity to kind of adapt and just accept it as a more natural thing. Maybe I'm wrong. I have my sight, so I'm still pretty fortunate for that. But yeah, I can't imagine losing your sight, especially like, what were you? You were in your 30s at the time that you were losing your sight. So that definitely a very big transition in that part of your life. But if you hadn't lost your sight, it's kind of like, there's always another side to the coin. If you never would have lost your sight, you never would have met my mother, which you two have been happily married for 5 years now?
5 years.
5 years now. So it's going to be 6 years in May. And again, like, we have all these moments that kind of define our life and kind of start creating this story. I'm really interested to hear about, your transition from moving from Canada without sight to Iowa after you met my mother, kind of doing the back and forth thing for a couple years, finally tying the knot, and now you're just now finally becoming an official citizen of the United States. So can we maybe talk a little bit about, that back and forth period before you guys ever got married, what it was like going through the airports without sight, in the various trips that we did before, kind of as a family. I'd love to hear your take on that as an individual without sight.
You're right. Basically, it is completely different when you're traveling sighted or blind. And I traveled both. When I was sighted, I used to travel a lot for my work, and I enjoyed it, and it was a lot of fun. And traveling sighted is great. Traveling blind is a little scary when you first do it, but you get used to it. I mean, you're going to get somewhere. You just got to do it. I'm thinking, first of all, I guess as a bit of a background, when I met your mom, it was on one of these sites, and you're right. Had I not been blind, I probably would have not met her, and I'd probably be still living in Ottawa, working somewhere else. But we met on the site, then we decided to meet at one point, and I came down at one point to just meet her, and I was staying here for a couple of weeks with some friends, and I'd come in on weekends, and your mom and I got together, and then after that, after a while, we agreed that we kind of liked each other enough to actually. I would come in every 6 months because I could work on the computer. Since I worked on the computer, it didn't matter where I was. I could work with my laptop, and work from here or work from home wouldn't make any difference. So I'd come here for 6 months and then go home for 6 months. We did that for about 5 years. And you, Matt, you came to Canada a couple of times as well. So you know what that traveling is like. And you were helping me and your mom out when we were traveling. And we could do it on our own with assistance but when we had somebody, some sighted help to help us travel, it's great. I remember the first time that I came here, I used to be a smoker. I quit smoking about almost 10 years ago now. Actually, it's been 10 years. And I still remember you've got to be pretty hard up for a cigarette when I got somebody to help me pass customs, past the checkpoint security and stuff like that at the airport. And then when I sat there, the plane was late by 2 hours. And I decided I can't sit here anymore. I got to go have a smoke. Get out on my own, out of the airport, out, completely out of everything to go and have a cigarette and then find my way back in. You really got to want to have a smoke at that point. Thinking about it now, I go, how stupid was I to need a smoke that bad? So that's at that point that I said, I'm going to quit. So the next time I came down, I quit the very day that I came here because it was impossible to quit smoking at home because everybody in my house smoked. So I couldn't quit. My roommate smoked, and it was impossible. So I came in for 6 months at one point, and I stayed with you and your mom for 6 months. And then at that point, I quit, and I haven't touched a cigarette since. That's probably one of the achievements in my life that I'm really proud of. Not that it has anything to do with traveling, but the fact that I would go out of this secure area to go and have a smoke and come back in on my own is pretty bad. But we did that for a while, and then like just traveling, you just gotta organize yourself. Make sure they will help you at the airport if you need to, if you're sighted. Some people like to do them on their own. There's new technology now with stuff like IRA, which is a company that you rent basically a pair of glasses which work with your phone. And what that happens is that you can call agents that would help you. Like you walk around with your cane, and you will have the glasses, and they have a little camera, and they'll tell you where to go, and if you need to do anything at the airport or anything, they'll help you find washrooms, which makes you a lot more independent. But I mean, that's a new thing. They've been out for about 2 years now. For a blind traveler, that's a great thing to have. And there's several ways of doing it, but I was just used to getting back and forth, getting somebody to pick me up at the airport, like your mom usually would come with a friend of hers and pick me up at the airport, and we'd go home. And that's basically how I did most of my traveling.
So that gives me a really good transition point because you brought up the technology and you brought it up at the time you're working on the computer, which allowed you to do this back and forth, living in the States for 6 months, living in Canada for 6 months for those 5 years. The term we call that, or that the term that's being adopted for that for individuals who are able to work pretty much from anywhere because their work is on the computer is known as digital nomading. And you kind of started doing that well before that's become a trend in a lot of workplaces now. So can you kind of talk about being blind? What has technology done for you, not only on an individual level, but also from your work experiences, from your ability to just say, hey, we got this convention for work down in Florida. I can bring my computer. I can still get work done. Like what kind of effect, positive, negative, maybe, has that had on your life?
I think that digital nomading is, I've been doing it for years, obviously. I mean, even before it was called digital nomading, I was doing it because I started doing that in the early 2000s when, like I said, when I first met your mom and stuff like that. And I did it here. But with my work, it does help. And technology is definitely a plus because with the iPhones, I can be anywhere and still be in communication with anybody at the office. If I need something from somebody at the office, call them up, email them. I can get that stuff, the information that I need quickly. And I can access pretty much any website, any documentation that I need because of the technology. There's so much technology. There's now you don't even need readers anymore. You take a picture of it with your camera, your phone will read it to you. You take a picture of your environment, and with the GPS, I don't get lost as much as you would think I would or anybody else because your GPS pretty much tells you where to go. There are certain technologies that are specifically for the blind as far as GPS. I have a technology called Blind Square, which as I walk down the street, if I have an earbud in my ear and I walk down the street, the phone will tell me, okay, you're at this corner and that corner, turn right to go. Let's say I tell it I want to go to the pharmacy, which is 4 blocks away. Of course, if you know where it is, you don't need the technology. But if you don't, you can map it out, and the phone will tell you turn right here, turn left there, and you're there. You're right at the pharmacy before you know it. And you just plan these routes, and it's great. And of course, obviously, having something like Uber and Lyft at your disposal, you don't always have to deal with money because money has always been an issue for blind people. You can give money, but you don't always necessarily know if cab drivers are always necessarily that honest with you. As a matter of fact, I had one at one point. This just like about 4 months ago. I took a cab because I couldn't take Uber because I don't remember why, but I just took a cab. And I've been taking the same cab, different companies and stuff like that, and it cost $10 from my bus that I took when I was coming back from Iowa. I was going back to Minneapolis to my workplace. I took the bus and off the bus station to my place at work, which I have a room up there, and it's kind of great that they let me do that. But it's a $10 cab ride. And at one point, the guy goes, "How much are you going to give me?" I said, "Well, how much does it say?" He says, $20. I said, "I tell you what, it's $10, and that's what it is. I mean, that's why I've been doing this right forever." And basically, as I told him, I'm going to give you $10, and that's all you're going to get. And and one of those things is I wish that I could have taken pictures or something to report the guy, but you can't. But being blind, unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there. You always got to be careful because there's always a lot of people out there. And if they're going to scam a blind person, they're going to scam anybody that they can. And that's a sad thing to say, but if you're going to travel, you got to be aware of some of the scams you're going to get involved in. And unfortunately, they are out there. But just to say that obviously the technology is great because now with Uber, I don't have to get my wallet out. The money's there. It's taken out of my credit card. I don't have to deal with. They don't even need to know if I have any money in my pocket. So that's one of those technologies that works great for blind people.
And I just think it's so cool because I'm not around very often anymore because I'm either like right now I'm doing work with the Peace Corps, living in Armenia, or I've done a lot of various travel opportunities in the past. It's kept me away from home for very extended amounts of time, from anywhere from like 4 to 8 months at a time. So, and it's funny because every time I come home, everyone, we're from a pretty small town. It's about like 4,500 people here in Iowa. And every time I come home, people know me and they're like, "Oh man, your mother must be so happy. James must be so happy. Your dad must be so happy." And yeah, they're happy. They're happy because I'm here. But a lot of the time I get the feeling that they're saying, "Oh, they must be so happy," because they're like, "Oh man, you're back. You can kind of help them out." And it's like, no, that's not really the case at all. It's like they've got all this technology and stuff anymore that like really they don't need me for a lot of things. It's my mom likes to use and abuse me for certain things just because it's easier than using some of the technologies. It's still a human being who's here ready to help. But honestly, like I don't ever feel like when I come back, like, it's been like, "Oh, we've been so oppressed for these last couple of months because you haven't been around. Like you got to start helping us." And if you, I'll just make a note. If you guys hear any extra noise, it's because we're actually at home right now. James, even though he's on holiday, he still gets calls from work and stuff, and his technology obviously has to talk because he can't see. So if you hear any background noise, phones ringing, that's what's going on here. Um, okay, so we've kind of covered your childhood, done some of the odd jobs that you've done, all the camping experiences with the family, losing your sight, obviously, and I'd like to really get into what your work is that you're doing now because I think this is so cool and very unique. You're working for a company that helps train blind people. It's called Blind Inc. out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it is a nonprofit organization. And you do their techie stuff for the NGO. And I'd like to hear a little bit about that because Minneapolis isn't very close to us by any means. It's a 3-hour car ride from where we live in Iowa. So how do you get kind of back and forth between the two? How long do you work up there? What work are you doing? I'm sure people would be really interested to hear about this.
What I do is basically I'm the webmaster and network manager for Blind Incorporated. Once I moved here in December of 2014, after I'd been accepted to immigrate to the States, I got my green card and then I started looking for work. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you ought to apply this job. They're looking for a network manager." That was in Minneapolis, as Matt said. And I applied and I got the job. And the job was just that, being network manager, running the networks and making sure that all the technology needs are met for all the staff and the students. We are a nonprofit organization. We're affiliated with the National Federation of the Blind, whose head office is in Baltimore. But what we do is we do train blind individuals in all kinds of different things. We train them. We have several classes for cooking, cleaning, which is home management. We have industrial arts. We had a student build a harp as their project because that's what they wanted to do. And we have also cane travel. I needed a little bit of cane travel skills update on my own. So one of the guys at work, while I was working, I took one day a week where I did cane travel skills. And so basically it's a great place to work for because they helped me with that. And then my main job, obviously, is, since I'm in the computer field, is to make sure that the web page is working well and our web page is accessible and that all the programs have all the technology they need. If somebody needs a new computer breaks down, whatever, and make sure that the network is operative, I do that. That's my job.
Yeah, I think the work that you guys do up there is just so cool and so inspiring. And work actually gives you an opportunity to travel, like I said, because you go back and forth between Minneapolis and our hometown in Iowa, as well as you have an annual convention that you go to. And I think it's so funny because there hasn't been a time that you haven't come back from one of those conventions and you haven't had like a really funny story because maybe like the people who are listening don't know this, but like when you get a group of blind people together, it's like primetime television. It is just the funniest thing because it's like watching a bunch of chickens run around with their heads cut off.
It's a lot of fun, okay? I mean, I don't care. I mean, I love it. I mean, figure we're talking about you're talking about 2,000 to 3,000 blind people basically swarming into one hotel, okay? And if you've got marble flooring, okay, and the hotel, and when you come in there, all you hear is tick, 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 the noise of the canes and everything. And, it's a great time. It's a lot of fun. There's activities, and we, of course, do, it's the National Federation of the Blind's annual, convention. And we go to that every year as part of my job. I go to it. And I learn stuff, and we attend seminars and meetings, and there's of course a major seminar for about 3 days that is basically the convention itself. But around that, there's all kinds of stuff going on. You can learn things, you can travel around and visit different areas. But it's a great fun. But the thing is, you learn something. And the thing is completely accessible. It's completely accessible because what they have over there is they have what they call human signs, which is something that a lot of sighted people don't know about is they hire people, or there's volunteers that stand in the different areas of the hallways and stuff like that and yell, "Conference 5 is over here. Conference 5 is over here. The stairs are over here." And as you listen, you hear these people yelling, and then you follow the voice and you go where you need to go. They tell you where to go. And if you need help, okay, I want to go to this particular conference room. Okay, like main meeting room is over here, and you just walk in and you find a room. And again, with the technology that we have, there's several technologies. Like I said, IRA is one of them, which you pay a monthly fee to get, which is the glasses with the camera. And there's other free ones that you can use as well. Be My Eyes is one of them. You use your iPhone and you use the camera on your iPhone. You bring it up and you say, "I want to get from here to there," and you use your iPhone as your eyes, and somebody will tell you where to go and what to do, basically, to find the whatever way you want. This Be My Eyes also does other things, like if you want to read something, or like on several occasions, being a computer guy, my computer doesn't always talk to me because the screen reader doesn't come up all the time. So what ends up happening is I call Be My Eyes, "What's on the screen?" They tell me, and then I know what to do. So okay, if they say, "Well, the screen is rebooting right now," well, I know not to do anything. Or they say, "Well, there's this thing on the screen you got to click." So then I use my mouse, and they said, "Move it to the right, move it to the left," and I click to the left or to the right, whatever they tell me to do. So I basically, they're my eyes for when I work on my computer until I can get my screen reader back up. But the conference itself is a great learning opportunity, and it's a wonderful place to be. And I always come back with, as Matt said, some stories. One time I remember, 2 years ago, I'm going along fast as I can, trying to get to a meeting, and all of a sudden I stick my cane in the spoke of this wheelchair, and the wheelchair kept on going. My cane got caught in the wheelchair, broke in half. So I remember they stopped, okay? And being blind, somebody was pushing that wheelchair. Being blind, it took me a couple of seconds to get my cane out of there. And once I got my cane out, they didn't say nothing. They just took off, and I have no clue who they were or what that was. And, of course, I didn't have an extra cane. So I was walking around for about a day or so with a cane that kind of like had the last maybe 6 inches of it flopping back and forth on the ground, because I didn't have a cane till I could find one for the following day, when I could get into where there's a spot you can buy canes. But when that happened, my cane did break, but the store where I bought the canes wasn't open till the following day. So that was really weird, walking around, because you'd hear that cane flip-flopping at the end. It was like having a fishing line.
It definitely sounds like you always have a fun time, and I always love hearing the stories when you come back. And I know my mom has expressed a lot of interest in going down and seeing firsthand kind of the craziness of it all with you at some point.
Well, we're hoping that she's going to come down this year, because this year it's not in Florida anymore. It's in Las Vegas next July. So I'm kind of hoping that she'll come down and we can have a good time, because she has some mutual friends that she could meet right there. She doesn't have to attend all the meetings, but she could come in for a week and visit with some of her friends that she knows.
So James, what does this next year look like for you? Like, what do you got planned? Is it going to be kind of same old? You got more work going on? Anything interesting in your life?
Well, right now I think everything is going to be the same. And like I said, you never know what's happening. I mean, you're leaving for another almost 6 months right now, 6 to 8 months, and then me and your mom will get to some kind of a routine again. And it's great having you around. And like your mom and I were saying about this morning, it's great to have you around. It's completely different for us. I'm so glad I'm here for Christmas. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep going, try to muddle through and keep going, do what we do. And I'll still work 2 weeks here, 2 weeks at Minneapolis, 1 week here. And no plans, but you never know what happens. Maybe we'll travel. I haven't decided if we're going anywhere, It depends on what happens. We don't know if we're doing anything specific. We may or we may not.
And I just thought about this as a funny travel opportunity for some of the listeners out there, when you're talking about the talking signs and the people who stand around at these blind conventions saying, "Hey, the elevator shaft, it's over here, and look out for the downward stairs. You might fall."
Well, they don't do that.
No, I know they don't do that. But again, like it's a really interesting job opportunity. It's only like probably a week-long commitment where you just really like you said, you get to go out to Las Vegas or Florida, hang out in a pretty cool area for a week and be in a completely different environment. I mean, even me personally, I've never been around 1,000 blind people before. Maybe 20 at most in my lifetime, all at once. But I mean, that sounds like a pretty fun opportunity. I think if I read the opportunity, I'd probably go and do it just kind of for the kicks of it all. But I want to say thank you to James. It was an absolute pleasure being able to sit down with him and talk, even though, we live together. We have very opposite schedules, so it's cool that we got to make this work out. I think he has such an interesting story that a lot of people out there are going to like listening to, because being blind is no walk in the park, even though you go and walk in the park every day, right? But it's very inspiring to hear your story, and I'm so thankful that you sat down with me today.
Well, Matt, it was a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm glad I was able to talk to you. And if it happens again that I can be of assistance or be invited again, I'd be more than happy to do it. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much again to my stepdad, James, for taking that time out of his insanely busy schedule to sit down with me while I was back home in America to talk about some adversities that he's had to overcome in his life. Obviously, as you just heard, it hasn't been an easy going for him, losing his father, and then years prior to losing his sight so late into his life and having a complete change in career and overcoming some of those obstacles. I mean, it was so cool of him to share that story and to open up and to let you guys learn a bit about him. And I hope he serves as a bit of an inspiration for some of you, because I think, James is just the perfect example of someone who has had to deal with a lot in his life, and yet he still finds the beauty in life, finds all the good in it, and is having such a successful career going back and forth, doing the whole digital nomading thing. So, it was so cool. So shout out to James again. Thank you so much for doing that, for sharing your story, and thank you to you guys for taking the time to listen to him. So, as I mentioned earlier, the whole question topic that I wanted to present to you guys this time around was I want to learn a little bit about some of your adversities. What was a time in your life that you really had to overcome something that was difficult? And again, this can be about travel, or in James's case, this was a personal story that he chose to share. Either way, I'd love to hear it. So you can go and head ahead and send me an email to whereintheworldismatt@hotmail.com and go ahead and share that story. Let me know about a time that you had to overcome adversity. And then also I want to hear about how you dealt with it. And now that it's past, or maybe it hasn't, maybe it's something that's currently going on and you want to talk about it. But if it's something that has happened in the past, what did you do? How did you approach it? And is there anything you would do differently? I know there's definitely times in my life where I've had to overcome adversity. And looking back on it, maybe I would have done some things differently. But the truth is like all of those experiences kind of lead us to where we're at right now. And I wouldn't change my current life for anything in the world. So I mean, it's trying to find that positive aspect on a really tough time in our life. I'm going to go ahead and put up another challenge yet again on Facebook for you guys. I'll be posting that once this episode goes live. But the first 3 people to go ahead, like, comment, and share the podcast link are going to win awesome Whitwim prizes, some Whitwim gear. And that just helps me to kind of promote this. And then also, if you're going to the direct link on YouTube, go ahead and give me a subscribe. We got the page up and running on YouTube, Where in the World is Matt? I'd love to get more subscribers so that you guys can keep up to date with me when the most recent content is being released. So thank you once again for taking the time out of your busy days to let me into your ears, let James talk to you about some of his life stories. I hope you guys found this inspiring. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your responses. Again, you can go ahead and shoot me an email, whereintheworldismatt@hotmail.com. I can't say it enough. And go ahead and subscribe on YouTube. Like me on Facebook. Check out the whereintheworldismatt.com if you're interested in a student who is trying to study abroad. So go ahead and do all of these things. I'm so glad that I'm able to share some of these experiences of mine and talk about some of my work currently in the Peace Corps, but also to share the stories of others. That's what it's all about. So, thank you. Wrapping up another awesome episode of the Where in the World podcast, and I will see you guys next month in March. Have an awesome day.